The ocean. It covers nearly 3/4 of our planet's surface, and it's the world's largest ecosystem, containing 1.3 billion cubic kilometres of water. Marine organisms are useful things. They produce more than half of the oxygen in the atmosphere. But you know this, because you are an intelligent, well-informed viewer. You've watched documentaries that pair such statistics with aerial views of the Earth to inspire a sense of wonder at the majesty of nature. But we did not make this film just to inspire wonder. No, we made this film to persuade you that it would be worth paying slightly more for your fish. You might not like the sound of that, but if we're going to take you inside the argument, you must change from an intelligent, well-informed viewer into something else entirely. You are now a fish, a Pacific yellowfin tuna to be precise, and you and the rest of your school are currently swimming in an area classified as the high seas. That is, the 64% of the ocean that is not under the jurisdiction of any particular government. But the high seas are changing. When your ancestors swam through this patch of ocean 60 years ago, the area was almost free of fishing boats and looked like this. But thanks to improvements in technology, there are now more fishing vessels, and the quantity of fish being caught on the high seas is 40 times higher than it was 60 years ago. Globally, the number of tuna has fallen by 60%, and nearly 90% of fish stocks are being exploited at or beyond sustainable limits. What can be done? The simplest answer is to restrict fishing on the high seas. You like this idea because you are now a fish, but to understand how it would work for humans, you'll have to turn back into one again. You are a fisherman on a vessel working the high seas. Fishing out here is expensive. That's why governments, mostly in rich countries, provide subsidies worth $8 billion a year in cheap fuel and insurance. This has encouraged unsustainable levels of overfishing, with more and more boats chasing fewer and fewer fish. As a fisherman, you can see your catch dwindling, but if you don't catch the fish, another fisherman will instead. So there's not much that you personally can do to change the situation. So now it's time to look at things from a policymaker's perspective, to see what can be done. You are a permanent representative to the United Nations. You argue that instead of paying people huge subsidies to fish on the high seas, rich governments could pay people not to, or encourage them to take up sustainable fish farming instead. You also suggest that governments should expand marine reserves, where fishing is forbidden, from 1% of the total area of the oceans to 30%. All this would create a breathing space and a breeding space that would allow fish populations to recover. That's good for fish, but these changes would create winners and losers among humans. Big, rich countries would mostly lose because they would have to pay for the boats, satellites, and aquatic drones necessary to police marine reserves. And with fewer fish being caught on the high seas, prices would rise by about 5%, experts reckon. By contrast, many poor countries would win. With stocks recovering and less fishing by rich countries on the high seas, more fish would swim into the coastal waters of poorer countries, where fish would become cheaper and more abundant. Negotiating this agreement won't be easy, but you point out that if we don't act soon, we'll all end up paying more either way, as overfishing makes fish become scarcer and more expensive. Restricting fishing on the high seas would ensure that fish can remain on the menu. It will cost a little more, but it would be a price worth paying to make fishing both fairer and more sustainable. Now that you've been turned back into an intelligent, even more informed viewer, we hope you will agree.